Hello once again, and welcome back to another Tip Tuesday. I am NeoQor, and we are back in the studio, and let's just dive into it. So, if you've been following my kick tutorial series, then by now you should have a sufficiently girthy kick, and it should sound something similar to this, right? So, if you do, then, obviously you want to put your kick into a track, right? So if you have a track, then you likely have a melody, right? You want your kick to follow along with the melody. So I'm going to show you how to pitch your kick so that it'll follow along with the melody. So here I have a melody that I've just whipped up. It's nothing special. It's just something real quick that I just kind of slapped together. So don't judge me. Right? So, and then we have our kick sample, which I've imported into the sequencer here, and you'll see I've done a little bit of extra work here already. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through what I've done, and I'm going to show you what I've done. So if you've tried to pitch your kick, and you've just been starting out, you probably think, well, I can just bring it into the piano roll and it'll sound, I can just put it at whatever pitch on this thing that I want and it'll sound fine. Well, no, you're wrong. It's going to sound like crap. If you try to pitch it up just one semitone or down one semitone, yeah, maybe that'll work. But if you try to bring it up maybe 4 or 5 steps, then it's going to sound really short and it's going to sound like crap. So for example, this is just the tail. But if I bring it up here, it's going to sound like, what the hell is that? That's not a kick. That's a friggin' bass note or something. That's not. So what I'm going to show you is how to pitch your kick in a way that'll, keep it from sounding super whack and shortening on you. So basically what I have here is I have 4 channels right here where my mouse is on the sequencer. Each 4 of these channels are copies of the same kick sample, right? But each one serves a different purpose. So this is my first kick pattern, right? I have one kick pattern, and in this I have punch and I have tail 1, right? Punch is always going to stay the same pitch, and you're going to use it in every single pattern. And what that is the volume envelope here, as you can see, is shortened with the hold time, so that all you will hear when you play this sample, when a note triggers, is just the beginning part of the kick, which is the punch or the talk or whatever the hell you want to call it. So let me play it for you. Right? So that's just the punch. The second one here is the tail. And this is it's the same sample, same kick sample, but in this, I have the volume envelope so that all that plays is the tail. And you kind of have to, you'll have to go through and you'll have to adjust the envelope so that that's all you'll hear. So if I play this, let me solo it. If I play this, then all you'll hear is the tail. Right? So same with this. In kick number 2, I have tail number 2. It's the same thing. It's the tail, but it's a copy of it. It's another channel, but it's pitched up to a different note. So this one is pitched up plus 300%. And keep in mind, I'm using the Pro Default pitching algorithm for all of these. Pro Default. You want to use Pro Default or you want to use monophonic. Monophonic typically works well with pitching hardstyle, hardcore kicks, but in this case, monophonic totally just made the kick sound totally nasty when I tried to pitch it up or down. So I'm not using monophonic, I'm using Pro Default. Pro Default works a lot better for this kick. Every kick is different, so don't think that one is, that one of these is the absolute thing to use for all kicks. It's not. So I'm using Pro Default for this. Right? And then so we have tail 3. It's the same deal. I solo it. So this one is pitched down minus 100 cents, right? And this one's also Pro Default. So when I play these, so I have, this is the main one, and then I have these other kick patterns here, kick 2, kick 3. So each pattern is the same kick, but just at a different pitch, right? So I play this. And you may be wondering why it sounds like the punch is separated from the tail. That's just the way I have it with the envelopes, because I like to have a little bit of space between the punch and the tail of the kick. Gives it a bit more of a kind of a French core sound. It gives it kind of a gated sound, but it's just something that I kind of like. You can shorten the amount of time that you can shorten the gap between the punch and the tail if you want, by just turning the delay down on the tail here. Basically, this delay knob, it's the pre-delay time. That's the amount of time it takes before you actually hear anything of the sample. Basically, I copied the hold time value of the punch and pasted it to the delay time of the tails. So when the punch is done playing, the tail comes in. So you may also notice that the bass is taken out of this sample, right? So I have the tail sent to this channel, channel 2 on the mixer. This is the tail channel. I have some effects on it. I'm going to turn these off for the time being. We're going to get to that in a bit. On the EQ down here, I have it EQ'd. I have the bass EQ'd. I have a low cut on it. Anything below about 104 hertz is taken out, because you can look at the parametric EQ and see where the bass notes are when the kick plays, and I basically have just found the highest bass note by looking at the parametric EQ, and I start the crossover at that value, just a little bit higher than the highest bass note in the range of pitches that the kick does. So that way I'm cutting out all the bass of the kick. And the reason why I'm doing that is because sometimes when you pitch a kick, even when you're using an algorithm like Pro Default or Monophonic, it'll screw with your pitching. It will screw with your bass notes, and it'll sometimes create some sort of weird effects or artifacts when you pitch it up or down sometimes, and it'll mess up your sub bass. So then what I'll do is I'll take this, the original kick sample, the tail, cut the bass out of it, and then I'll bring the bass back in as its own layer, as a 3OSC layer, as basically a sub channel. It's just a sine wave. It's the same exact sub bass instrument preset, whatever, that I used earlier on in the kick tutorial series to create the original sub bass for this kick sample. So you gotta sometimes bring the bass back in, just so now, when I bring this kick sub in with the kick and I play it. So now you can hear the sub is, and this is out of time, so let me fix this. But now you can hear the sub bass, because I re-added it back in. It's clean, and it's MIDI. It's just MIDI notes. It's not a sample that's being pitched. It's pure. It's just data. It's MIDI data, and of course I have a little bit of distortion on the sub in the mixer effects chain. Bass maker. It's the same mixer preset that I used, same effects chain I use in making the original kick sample that we're using here. And that allows the bass to come through cleanly and be layered with the kick sample without it warping or whatever, right? So on the mixer here, I have the punch. So this punch layer that I just showed you, this is sent to its own mixer channel, and I have some compression on that, some EQ on that as well. I'm cutting out most of the sub bass on the punch and just boosting kind of the high bass on it, because the sub bass we really want the sub bass to be focused on the tail and the sub layer of the tail. We don't really need a whole lot of sub bass in the punch itself. And then I have the tail, and I have some effects on this. The reason why I have EQs, I have a lot of EQs on the tail, is because without them, as you may hear, it sounds kind of weird when it pitches up. Like it's a little too high, a little too resonant. Sounds kind of like a cricket. So what I have here is I have some cuts that I made to certain frequencies, and all I did was just sweep the band, you know, like so. I just create a little boost, create a little notch here, and just sweep it, and I find those annoying frequencies. Right? So you sweep the band, you sweep the frequency band, and you can find those annoying frequencies that'll, you know, once you go over it, it'll scream at you and you'll hear it, and then you can just kind of bring it down a little bit, right? So that's what I've done with all of these, right? And then I've also added just a little bit of extra distortion just for some extra, you know, girth and a little extra dirt to the kick. So I'll turn all these on and I'll let you hear what it sounds like. So it kind of changes the character a little bit. Let me put the sub back on. Right, so it's just a little extra, you know, dirty sound to it. I also have the punch compressing the tail, the sub layer, and then this layer here, which is the kick crunch, which I'm going to show you in a minute. It's just a synth layer that I've added to the kick to give the kick a little bit of extra crunch and kind of, you know, help improve the character of the kick. So the punch is compressing. So the punch is compressing the sub layer, it's compressing the tail, it's compressing the kick crunch. So whenever the sub comes in, the tail, the sub, the crunch ducks, and then comes back in when the punch is done. So that just helps the punch come through a little more, you know, a little clearer. And I'm pretty sure I did that. I did that in the original, like the actual making of the kick itself, of the original sample. So I'm just basically just doing it again with these new layers that I've added. And then, all right, so I'm going to show you the crunch now. And the crunch is just it's just a preset that I made, which I've showed you in some of my other tutorials. It's called the freeform growl, which is just a saw wave, and then these other two waves. I've made a couple of tweaks to it. Like I've turned on the second oscillator, I've turned the coarse pitch all the way down to the lowest octave, so they're all on the lowest octave. I have it kind of low on the piano roll, so it's kind of a nice low farty sound. It's nice and crunchy. I have a little bit of cutoff automation on it. I have a high pass on it with the resonance turned up a bit, so I'm cutting out a lot of the bass frequencies of this, because again, this is just going to be part of the tail. We don't need a lot of bass on the crunch because the sub layer is doing a lot of the work for us in covering the low end. So you don't want to muddy that up too much. So the crunch is just giving it a bit of extra oomph to the kick, right? So I'll let you hear it. Right. So it just kind of sounds like a bass line or bass layer a little bit, but just with no real low end. And then the envelope of the crunch is the same as the envelope of all the tails, because, you know, of course you want all of your tail layers to be timed out the same. Otherwise, they're not going to sound like they're together as one sound. They're going to sound like disjointed, and it's going to just sound sloppy. So you want to make sure that the envelopes are the same. And you can copy the values on these knobs from one channel to another if you so choose. So now I'm going to show you the kick with the crunch layer. The crunch layer, on the effects chain, I just have blood overdrive with the times 100 preamp turned up a little bit, so it's distorted on there. And then I have Camel Crusher on here. It's distorted there. Got the mechanical distortion turned up a little bit. Tube warmth preset turned up. Just your basic distortion. So I'll show you what it sounds like with the crunch layer. Whoops. Right, and then this is without the crunch layer. So you can tell there's a huge difference. Just adding that one layer just adds so much more oomph and fatness and girth to the kick. And I have a little bit of stereo separation on this layer as well. You may notice I'm basically doing kind of redoing what I did when I was making the original sample, and you may wonder, well, what the heck is the point of doing this over again, you know, if I already did it when I was making the sample? Well, you do it when you're making the original sample because in the end your sample is a good strong foundation to bring into a project, and then once you have that good foundation you can pitch it. But if it doesn't pitch perfectly and it starts to sound whack, you're going to have to do more work to it. You're going to have to add some stuff to make it sound right when it pitches. Pitching the kick, bringing a kick into a project and pitching it is not always the end. It's not always the end of the process. If it sounds whack when you pitch it, which some kicks will, you can't really always control that. It just depends on the kind of kick that you're making. Some kicks will pitch weird, and you will have to do more work to get them to sound right. And when I bring, like, for example, in the dealer remix that I made, I mean, I had brought that kick sample sounded fine when I brought it in, and I had to pitch it, and I still did way more work to that sample after I brought it in. The original sample was good, but, you know, sometimes you got to put in the extra work to get it to sound good, to get it to sit right in a mix, to get it to sound right in a project. And that's just how it is sometimes. Sometimes that's just how it be. So all these layers here in the project now together give me a pitched kick, you know, that doesn't sound super whack. Of course, it definitely needs more work. It can always be better. But at least we have a really good, solid start, right? So I'll go ahead and play it with the melody now, and you can kind of hear what it sounds like. Right, so there you go. That's now we have a pitched kick. We have a pretty girthy pitched kick, and you know, we didn't really change how it sounded from the original sound too much. I mean, the original sound, you know, it sounds fairly similar to the original sound. If we wanted to make it sound even more similar to the original sound, we can always affect the resonance on the crunch. So that it'll sound a little closer to the original sample. Which, you know what? Let me just go ahead and do that now. Why not? Let's play with it. Let's see what that sounds like. Why not? Let's experiment. You know, we can always turn this. You can always turn the blood overdrive up a little bit too. But yeah, basically, just keep experimenting. Like, it all you can do is just keep messing around until you get a good sound. But now we have a kick that's pitched, and it doesn't sound totally whack when it goes up and down in pitch, right? And that's what we want. So from here, you can do just about anything you want to the kick and affect the character and the timbre and all that kind of stuff, and the formant will sound pretty consistent. Um, you know, when you pitch it to different pitches. I highly recommend pitching the original sample to the different pitches that you want first, to go with the melody, and then adding your layers on top of that. That way, you already know what pitches you want to, what notes and what pitches you're using throughout your track, and then you don't have to like go back and you don't have to go back and try to change everything. When you realize, oh, I need to also get it to this pitch. Like figure out how you want your kick progression to go first, and then layer, and then figure the progression out, pitch it to that, and then layer it, and then affect it, and then do all the stuff that you need to do to get it to sound right. Because otherwise you're going to be going back and retracing your steps, and that's just not going to be fun. So yeah, so that is pitching kicks. I hope this was valuable, and I hope you guys found this tutorial series useful. And if you guys have any questions about what I did at any point in the series, please reach out to me via email, or Facebook or Instagram. Email's usually the best. It's the most direct. But yeah, so thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you next week for another Tip Tuesday. All right, bye-bye.